and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is Friday the 13th, July 13th, 2018, and we do a live stream every night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And tonight's topic is, why are central banks buying gold? But before we get to the topic, let's check out what happened during the day in the markets. Gold and silver both closed down on the day. Gold down $5.90 to $12.41. Silver down to $15.78, down 14 cents. Gold-silver ratio is creeping back up towards 80-1. Over on the cryptocurrencies, small movement on the cryptos. Bitcoin at 62.27, Ethereum at 433, Bcash under 700 at 696, EOS 690, and Litecoin just a touch under $77. So not much movement in alternative currencies. Now, during the day, we had a few pretty exciting stories. The Mueller team, and announced by Rosenstein, announced that they had indicted another 12 Russian individuals who had supposedly interfered in our democracy and took stuff from the Democratic National Committee. And it just seems this was timed to coincide with the aftermath of the Strzok and Page testimony, and also to remind people as Trump goes to visit Putin that there is this sinister side of the Russians and that possibly Trump is involved, and there's calls now to have him not meet with the Russians or to address this pressing issue immediately. Not quite sure what the purpose of indicting people outside of the country that'll never serve trial. I mean, they learned that when they indicted the troll farms, and one of them showed up and now they have to defend it. The interesting thing in all this is there's no indication that there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and these actions of either the first indicted troll farm group of indictees and the second set now that have been indicted, Russian, I think they're intelligence officers. Page, supposedly, that is Strzok's lover and lawyer at the FBI, who was the one who said, Trump's not going to be president, right. And she met today behind closed doors with Congress. Not sure she avoided her contempt charge. And as some astutely pointed out, she didn't show up on Wednesday because she wanted to see the public testimony of Peter Strzok. And then, having seen that, she can keep her story straight. The other thing that was interesting that I picked up, that I didn't pick up yesterday, is that Strzok's emails and texts were not all turned over. And the reason for that is the Inspector General doesn't have that type of power, so he just asks Peter Strzok, give us what you got, and he gives it to them, and he pulled like what Hillary Clinton did. He went through and he self-selected what he thought were the appropriate emails to hand over, the ones that he thought were work-related, and then he just ignored the others. So who knows what's on the other emails and what other animus or bias he might have shown. All right. What else happened? A very important piece of data came out, India. India announced that their trade deficit had increased to the highest level in 10 years. Now that is a problem. It relates to gold, because one of the reasons India has a account deficit is it imports its gold. It doesn't have its own domestic gold mining production, and Indians go nuts for gold, and they consume new gold like 800-900 tons a year, and that's pretty expensive, and it has to come in through the ports, and it screws up India's balance of trade. When this happens, India gets nervous, and they start looking for ways to stop the import of gold. They already have a 10% tariff to prevent it coming in. Then they have a goods and services tax on it once it is in to slow down demand. They've even tried to take gold out of people's hands and get them used to a more digital form or a paper form by offering them interest on their gold. But now that their trade deficit has gone higher again, and the tariff hasn't worked and to slow down the gold imports, nor has the goods and services tax, you just wonder what they're going to do next. They can increase one or both of those taxes in order to try to slow the gold demand. Now, what happens then normally is they probably don't slow the gold demand. It probably just gets imported illegally or smuggled illegally. I generally report on at least 2 or 3 stories a week where someone is caught smuggling gold in fairly large amounts into India, in their rectum, in books. And one clever one was they put it in the toilet, and on the plane they hide it there, and then someone else comes in and picks it up when the plane lands, when they have these connecting flights, and it seems to work that way. All right. Let's see, were there any other stories? Nope, that's it for the story. So let's get to the topic of the evening. Why are central banks buying gold? Now, if you remember from last night, I think I might start to analyze everything in this framework of Alexander Pope, the poet who wrote in the essay on criticism, "A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pierian spring. Their shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking largely sobers us again." And we went over that last night, and basically it means that just you have a little bit of knowledge, that's a dangerous thing, because unless you look a little deeper, these little bits of knowledge will intoxicate the brain and get you all excited that you found out some information. But it then goes on to say, and drinking largely sobers us again. So you may hear something, central banks are buying gold. And then you get all excited, and that makes you say, I need to buy gold. I need to do like central banks are doing. Or China is buying gold, so I am going to buy gold. That's, in a sense, a little learning is a dangerous thing, because you extrapolate from that. I don't know what you extrapolate from that. You come in with a bias that 2 + 2 is gold or something, and you find out someone is buying gold or something is buying gold, and therefore you should buy gold. In fact, someone wrote as a comment, central banks are buying gold. That's all I need to know. And that's clearly a case of a little learning is a dangerous thing. That is a shallow draft, and that has intoxicated that person's brain. And if he knew more, maybe he'd realize that that's not all he needs to know. Central banks are buying gold. That's all I need to know. Okay, let's look at why central banks are buying. Well, first of all, before you look at why they're buying gold, you want to ask yourself the question, is it true? Are central banks buying gold? And it is a true statement. So now people can say, see, central banks are buying gold. That's all I need to know. Well, no, you need to know a bit more than that. First of all, how many central banks are there in the world? It's like 156 of them, I believe. All right. Which central banks are buying gold? I don't know. Central banks are buying gold. I read it on the internet. They weren't buying gold, and now central banks are buying gold. Because gold is money, period. Central banks know what is coming. Well, hold on a minute. Which central banks are buying gold? Well, look it up, and you'll find out that the central banks that have bought gold over the last 2 years are very limited. They are Russia, Turkey, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. What about China? What about China? No, the People's Bank of China, the Central Bank of China, has not added gold to her reserve since October 2016. They're lying, or they're not lying, they're playing Sun Tzu. They're not going to tell you because China is smart. China likes gold. Okay, just a quick aside on China. You can't have it both ways. Either China is smart and buys gold, then if they don't report it because there's some Sun Tzu there, then don't expect China to be a trusted international currency if they lie about stuff. Actually, what I believe is China's not lying about its gold. This is another thing that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, because people equate whatever the People's Bank of China reports as China's gold. That's not true. They don't think that for any other country. The Reserve Bank of India has 557 tons. No one says they're lying, there's more gold in India. Of course there is. People's Bank of China is the central bank of China. It has 1,843 tons. It's had the same amount since October 2016. Sure, there's other gold in China. It's just not on the People's Bank of China's balance sheet. So, the Central Bank of China is not buying gold. That doesn't mean there's not gold demand in China. That doesn't mean the Chinese government isn't buying gold. But the point was, the people heard was, central banks are buying gold. Okay. And that's why I say, which central banks, how many central banks are buying gold? People's Bank of China is not buying gold. So you can't include the People's Bank of China in your central banks are buying gold. If you want to expand it to certain countries are buying gold, there's gold demand in India, there's gold demand in China, but that's not what the statement is. The statement is central banks are buying gold. All right, so what central banks are buying gold? Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkey, and Kyrgyzstan. The bulk of the gold that's being bought is being bought by Russia. That is Russia and Turkey, and only Turkey recently. How much gold are they buying? Okay. Why does that matter? Well, it matters a lot. Because first of all, if they're buying gold and you think it's important, I think you'd want to know how much gold they're buying and how much of that gold is in relation to the gold supply, the amount of gold produced in a given year, the amount of gold that's above ground, and the amount of gold that they already have. So, the largest purchaser of gold by a central bank has been Russia. I report on it monthly. Russia has purchased 215, 199, and 224 tons the past 3 years, with last year, 2017, being a record year for Russia. Well, there you go. Russia's buying gold because they know what's coming. Russia is smart. Russia buys gold. Russia buys gold every month. That's all true. Russia added a record 224 tons of gold to reserves in 2017. Keep in mind that there are 190,000 tons above ground. Keep in mind that about 2,500 tons have been mined every year for the last 3 or 4 years. So while Russian central bank numbers are large and they are record for Russia, they have no real impact on the gold price or even the gold demand. As I mention often, India imports 900 tons of gold a year. So that's basically 4 times the amount, more than 4 times the amount that Russian central bank adds to its gold reserves. So Russia is the #1 central bank that buys gold. There's only a handful of them that do. So the statement is correct. Central banks are buying gold. Yes, central banks of Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Turkey. Now, why? Before we get to why they're even buying it, where does Russia get its gold? Russia is the second largest gold producer in the world. Russia produces about 300 to 350 tons a year. And most of that, they basically take their ruble, they buy from their domestic miner, and they're supporting their own mining endeavors. And then they're taking that gold and they're adding it to their central bank's reserves. Now, why do they do that? For many reasons. First of all, Russia has been under sanctions on and off since 2014. And if you look at when they really started to add to their gold reserves, it was around 2014 is when they really stepped it up. Russia was selling gold from 1998 to 2004. And that's because Russia, from time to time, has difficulty managing its foreign reserves. What Russia decided around 2008, 2009 was to start to add gold to reserves, and the sanctions really made them step it up. So in 2011, they added 93 tons, 2012, 75 tons, 2013, 78 tons. Not bad. But then they really stepped it up in 2014, 171, 2015, 208, I said 215, 208 tons, 2016, 199 tons, and 2017, 224 tons. Clearly, what they said, and they stated why they were doing this, they wanted to rebalance their reserves. Not only did they want to rebalance them and try to steer away from U.S. Treasuries because they don't do much trade with the U.S., and they wanted to balance out the reserves. They also wanted to increase the reserves. Now, this is very interesting. Russia was trying to increase her reserves during a time period when technically they were losing money and having difficulties, but they thought it was prudent not to go on a debt binge like China and the other countries, but to batten down the hatches and try to increase the reserves. And they've done that from about $350 billion almost up to $500 billion, and they've done that on the basis of rebuilding up their U.S. Treasuries, which they had built up from about $60 billion up to about $119 billion. And just in April, they sold those back down to $48 billion, but also increasing their gold reserves from about $35–40 billion worth and getting that up to about currently $80 billion. So Russia's entire gold hoard of 1,890, no, it's over 1,900 tons, 1,900 plus tons that they have is worth about $83 billion. So Russia now has 1,928 tons through May, and that's worth about $83 billion. Now you have to ask yourself, what is $83 billion in the entire financial system? It's not much at all. But Russia has bought gold, and that is the most significant central bank purchase of gold. And frankly, it's less than 10% of global mining production. They get it from their own mine, and the reason they do it is they're under sanctions, and the ruble is a very, very weak currency. So why wouldn't you, if you have gold in your backyard, dig it up and exchange it for your currency that basically no one in the international financial community wants, and you're under sanctions? So Russia's not buying gold because they are smart, and gold is money, and everyone... They may think that, but there's a real practical reason for them to buy gold, and that is because they have it in their backyard, and also because they're under sanctions. They're trying to improve their foreign reserves. They're better off holding gold than rubles for sure, and to a certain extent they feel they're better off holding gold than U.S. Treasuries. Why feed a foreign adversary and by holding their treasuries? Now, once you get past Russia, the story becomes not even a story, because the next largest central bank that's buying is Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan, I started following about 2 years ago because I noticed they were on a streak. I think now, since I started following them, they have bought gold, added gold to reserves for about 68, 69 months in a row. That's even better than Russia. Some months Russia doesn't buy anything. Well, Kazakhstan has now passed the United Kingdom in gold reserves. It's quite impressive. The total amount of gold that the Central Bank of Kazakhstan now has is about 318 tons. It's not really that much, but it highlights that it's more than what the United Kingdom has. That gold is worth about $14 billion. Again, not a significant amount. The amount of gold they have, 310 tons, is not significant really at all. In fact, the GLD and all these other ETFs supposedly have in total about 2,500 tons. So whatever the Central Bank of Kazakhstan has, good for her, 318 tons. And it is 44% of their foreign reserves. So what does it mean? Well, guess what Kazakhstan is also? A gold mining country. And guess what's happened since 2006, since they've developed their gold mining? In 2006, Kazakhstan mined just 21 tons of gold. In 2017, Kazakhstan mined 70 tons of gold. So is it no surprise that Kazakhstan has been adding to gold reserves an increasing amount, and last year added, let's see, what did they add? I think it's 40 tons, 36 tons of gold in 2016 and 40 tons in 2017. And that corresponds with an increase of 63 tons mined in 2015 to 70 tons mined in 2017. So what is Kazakhstan doing? It's going into its backyard, digging up gold, turning in their Kazakh tenge, and buying gold with it, exchanging their currency, which no one wants other than people in Kazakhstan to conduct business. And then the rest of it, they're selling to add to their reserve position if they actually make a profit. All right, so Kazakhstan is the second other central bank that is buying gold. They're not buying very much. It's very impressive for a country with a GDP that is dwarfed by what the United Kingdom has. They have a GDP of about 160 billion. Their gold is worth 13 billion. United Kingdom has a GDP of 2.5 trillion, and they have less gold. They have 310 tons. Now, England sold their gold back in 2000, and they sold about 60% of it. Swiss National Bank did the same. The reason this is not important is, first of all, there's other sources of gold demand that are far larger and far more significant, including jewelry demand. But second of all, the fiat system of United States, EU, Japan, China, ECB, all the big debt-based countries. China is leading the world now in debt creation. Japan, all the European countries, United States. Canada has no gold, and they have a AAA sovereign rating. They're all in agreement with the IMF that they're not gonna be making a big deal out of gold, and they're making a big deal, or they value each other's debt. And that's why they all can get away with massive credit creation and massive buying of each other's debt and holding them on each other's balance sheet and calling them assets. So it may be smart for Bank of Kazakhstan to buy their own gold, and it's smart for Russia, but it doesn't mean much at all in terms of overall gold demand and overall it doesn't really. I guess you can use another Shakespearean thing, is full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And the sound and fury comes from, I would say, the gold pumper community making such a huge deal out of the fact that central banks are buying gold. Yeah, they are, but why are they buying it, and how much are they buying, and where are they getting it from? They're getting it from their backyard. So, as Eddie Murphy would say, I'm not impressed. I think it makes sense for them to do it. I'm impressed that they're smart. But it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't mean I should run out and go buy gold because central banks are buying gold. That's all I need to know. That's short-sighted. Now, the other one, Kyrgyzstan. Now, Kyrgyzstan, they have less than 8 tons of gold. So I don't know why anyone would get excited about it. What you can get excited about is the mentality of the governor, the central bank governor there, is very pro-gold. He wants everybody in the small country of Kyrgyzstan to own 2 or 3 ounces of gold. So he's a very pro-gold, sound money guy. But his country is going to have no impact on whether there's a gold standard or whether there's gold demand, because it's a tiny country. But to their credit, they've gone from 4 tons of gold in July 2015. They've doubled in just 3 years. Also, what is Kyrgyzstan? They also have a gold mining business in their own backyard. So, of course, they buy gold. Now, the other one that's been significant that had been a seller of gold is Turkey. Now, Turkey has one of the worst currencies in the world behind Venezuela and Argentina. And when you have a currency that is debasing rapidly, you better find somewhere to put it. And they've been exchanging their horrific currency for gold. Makes total sense. In fact, Erdogan, whatever his name is, the guy who runs that country, recommended that its citizens buy gold. Why? They know. It's not that they know. Okay, here's a very important point that is a fact. Gold is anti-fiat, and gold is stronger than any fiat. That's a fact. But the fiat currencies that are doing badly, you certainly are going to be better off with gold. But as we've seen, fiat currencies that appear to be strong, like the euro, the dollar, the yen, and so on, you actually lose value against the dollar, against the euro in certain years. But if you look at what happens, for example, in the Turkish lira, let's see, I'm going to go back to January 2017. An ounce of gold back then cost you 4,400 Turkish lira. In January 2018, it cost you about 4,900 lira. Today, it costs 6,100 lira. So you have a big increase in the price of gold versus the Turkish lira. So of course, Turkey is in panic and realizes if they hold on to their lira, the value of that lira has dropped. Let's figure out what that is against the against gold. So gold is now 6,100, and little under a year and a half ago, it was 4,100. So that's a $2,000 difference. 4,100. That's a 50. I could have done it in my head. That's a 50% devaluation in the Turkish lira. So of course they're buying gold. Whatever extra lira they have, they better buy it. If you see that, now this is the argument. This is the argument for why people should have gold. It is a hedge against fiat debasement. Now it's possible you could see that wherever you happen to be right now in your own home currency. You would want to have gold in case the dollar dropped 50%. But here's why the dollar dropping 50% doesn't make any sense. Not because the dollar is strong on its own, but the dollar is strong relative to all the other currencies. Because all the other currencies are doing the same thing the United States does. Here's another thing. The little learning is a dangerous thing. Most people can cite for you all the debt that the U.S. has. They could tell you the $21 trillion deficit. They could tell you the 150, 250, whatever number it is, unfunded liabilities. They can tell you the pension funds. They can tell you the states. That does, when you would think, weaken the dollar. But there's people who know that. They don't know what those numbers are for China. They don't know what those numbers are for Europe. They don't know what those numbers are for the yen. And so when you look at the dollar index and you see the dollar getting strong, you say, how can that be? The dollar has so many problems. Because it's related, it's based against, it's benchmarked against the euro and all the other currencies that are also engaged in fiat. That's why the yuan is dropping like a stone for two reasons. It has massive debt. It's trying to deleverage, but it's not. It's continuing to increase its credit creation to try to boost GDP. And now it's letting the yuan go even lower because they have these tariffs on them. So when you look at the baskets of fiat currencies out there, the dollar is actually better off because it actually pays a rate of interest. And it's unsustainable. I get all that. And the U.S. can't pay the interest. Nor can the ECB. Nor can any of these other... Look at the Bank of Japan. They buy every bond that comes out of Japan. They're all... So if you compare them all against each other, the United States dollar does okay. Now, if you compare them against gold, you say, wait a minute. People should look at this entire fiat basket and throw it out the window and just realize that the real value is in gold. Well, if that were true, then gold would be much higher. But the central banks of China, Europe, Japan, Sweden, Denmark, United States, Canada, they're all, Australia, Switzerland, they're all in the fiat game where they're all boosting the fiat system. None of them are looking to jump out and create a gold standard. And that's why the bulk of the financial value in the system is in this fiat system and not in gold. Now you have your outliers whose fiat isn't doing well, and that's Venezuela, Argentina, Turkey, to a certain extent Russia, Ukraine, Syria. If you look at the price of gold in those currencies, it's gone way up. But in yen, rupees, it's gone up this year. They went from 81,000 to 86,000. But in British pounds and European euros, RMB, Swiss francs, Canadian dollars, not much. Now, Brazilian real, sure. The gold has gone up against the Brazilian real. Because, again, that's not a good currency. And a lot of it's because they have U.S. debt. And when the dollar goes higher, then they have to find money to pay off the U.S. debt. And they have to sell their own currency. All right. That about does it for that topic. But I like to look at things when people cherry pick a piece of data. They attach a significance to it. Central banks are buying gold. That's all I need to know. Why are central banks buying gold? Because gold is money, period. Or because they know what's coming. And maybe not. Maybe that has nothing to do with it. And I don't think it does. They're all in this Ponzi central bank debt-based credit creation scheme together. And that's why the central banks, the large ones, if you look at the list of the top gold holders, if you can believe the numbers that they give you, none of them are adding gold other than Russia in the top 10 and now Turkey. But if you look at the Netherlands, Germany, France, Italy, United States, Portugal, Spain, all the large holders, they're not adding any gold, and they've agreed amongst themselves not to do so. All right, let us now look at some of the comments that we have. Internet has it, Putin will give POTUS the content of Hillary's servers. Well, Trump asked for that, didn't he, during one of the campaign slots? He said, Russia, we got to get the 30,000 emails. I'm sure that the NSA either had them, they might have just recently destroyed them, but there's no way you can lose emails like that. Gold is in the toilet. Database DNA, monkey see, monkey do accounts for most actions in the world. Go outside and look it up and see how many people do the same. Yep. Skywatch Central, could it be because gold is real and tangible form of money? No. I think it's for the reasons I just gave. These central banks are not interested in real and tangible money. Why? Because then they can't do credit creation to boost their economy. They all believe in a false premise that somehow works, though, is that you can print your way, you can borrow your way into prosperity. And politicians like that because they can promise stuff with fiscal policy. They like when monetary policy helps them out and prints money. So, and then they say, well, the people won't stand for it anymore. Yeah, they will. They don't even know anything about gold. They don't understand the idea of having a monetary system that's restrained by a unit of gold. I always like to point to the Mark Dice videos, and people say, oh, you can't, those are people that are idiots. No, they're not. They are idiots, but they will pick a chocolate bar over a bar of gold. So how do you expect them to demand gold in the monetary system when the reset happens? That's another one, the reset. There's always going to be a reset, and it's going to be gold and SDRs. I don't know. Gus is in. Good day. It's not good day, Gus, for you. It's very late in the evening. All right. Like he says, I got 5 channels open at the moment that I'm listening to, but I wanted to drop by and greet you. It's probably not a good idea to try to listen to 5 live streams. All right. Gold is in a 3-year channel. It will bounce off support in a week or 2. I've been hearing that for years. It's always, you'll see, you'll see. All right. Annabelle, thanks for the clarity on this subject which saturates so many alt news feeds. The problem with the alt news feeds is you get one story. China has set the price of gold to 900 SDRs. And then everybody runs with that story. That story is nonsense. China hasn't set the price of gold to SDRs. In fact, I looked at the price of gold and SDRs. It's broken that correlation. It's not even 900 to 1 anyway right now. That's just made up stuff. That makes no sense whatsoever. I'm not even going to go into why that doesn't make any sense. That story makes as little sense as gold back yuan game changer. Just go over to the Shanghai Gold Exchange if you are an oil producer and just exchange your yuan for gold. Simple as that. China has the answer for everything. Never happened. It never was going to happen. Oh no, we never said that. What we meant was the oil producers would get yuan in the yuan oil futures contract, the petro yuan. And then that would create great demand for gold. And then they would go out and buy gold, creating additional demand. And since supplies are already tight, we would have a surge in gold. None of that happened either. Sovereign-sized gold buy in 45 days, guaranteed. Never happened. COMEX default, imminent COMEX default. China is going to stand for delivery. And you people listen to this stuff and you repeat it. Not you people, but these channels, they all repeat the same story. They trot the same stories out. They get 1,000 likes, 10,000 visits, and they just keep repeating them. Silver is rarer than you think. Gold is going to run out tomorrow. It's always a new story, and the price doesn't go higher on any of this stuff. And you would think they'd have a reason, then it's manipulation. Well, if you knew there was a manipulation, why would you think your new invented story would change things? Because elites will eventually lose control. Elites are losing control. Rothschilds and Rockefellers. And the Ponzi scheme that they are running will collapse. It's the same thing over and over and over. Maybe one day you'll have the time and inclination. You can explain the idea that fiat currencies have a limited lifespan. What's the rationale for that statement? I can explain that now. It doesn't take that long. This is another one of these secret, hidden secrets of money. Yes. The idea of fiat currencies, when you have them, and you have a system where there are functioning non-fiat currencies, that a fiat currency will eventually collapse because there's somewhere to go. So for example, in the United States, when the United States was on the quasi-gold standard of the Bretton Woods Agreement from 1944 to 1971, you would have currencies of limited lifespan that maybe weren't part of the Bretton Woods Agreement, had not backed their currencies by gold, that have hyperinflation, and boom, the currency would be gone. Hungarian florent, they don't last. Why? Because fiat currencies are inherently flawed in a system where people believe that a currency needs a backing, and if a fiat currency is only based on confidence, if the confidence is lost in that particular fiat currency, it will collapse and monies will go into the currencies that are backed. The problem with people saying we're overdue for a collapse in the dollar. Fiat currencies last only 40 years on average, and this current fiat currency is well past its lifespan. Its sell-by date has passed. Okay, but the whole world is on a fiat currency system. The reason it's lasted this long is they all have a vested interest in keeping a fiat currency system because they're all running their central banks on a fiat currency system. There isn't one that's broken rank. If there was one, then they would all collapse and everyone would move into whatever that particular currency was if it really was back. But what country can even do that at this point? What country even has the incentive? Oh, China does. China wants to crush the dollar. China and Russia have had it, and so have the BRICS. They are tired of dollar hegemony. That's another nonsense statement. They're all tied into this together. China's just not going to, we're going to dump $1.2 trillion worth of treasuries. That will show the United States that we mean business. That belies, that is really not understanding what would happen to China if they did that. That only satisfies somebody's emotional poke in the eye of the United States. That would destroy China. China borrows, and people don't know this, all those state-owned banks that they have, the ones that have non-performing loans left and right everywhere, not just in real estate, they issue their debt in dollars. So they're not going to just crush the dollar. It makes no sense, any of this stuff. So people use this. Fiat currencies have a limited lifespan. If you look over history, you'll see they average this and this and this. So what? We're not in that time period. It's not because this time is different. Well, it is because this is the first time ever in history where there is no backed currency anywhere. And that's why it continues, because you don't have any country interested in making their currency stronger than the others. When they say currency wars, there really hasn't been. They all coordinate this. The example of that is US did QE for 4 years. Then they convinced, the second they stopped, Japan started. Then Fisher, the vice chair of the Fed, convinced Mario Draghi to do QE. Now he's doing QE. They're taking turns. One does QE for a few years. Now the Fed raises rates up to 175. Maybe they'll raise them to 250. And then when it's time for the Fed to have to start to cut rates, that's when Europe, remember they said at the end of 2019, that's when they'll start raising rates. It's all coordinated. We've never seen this level of coordination before. Historically, we haven't seen this. Now, Trump is throwing a monkey wrench in this maybe, in that with the tariffs with China, they may have some type of battle. And that may make things change, but I don't think it's going to move anyone into a gold standard. All right. Here's let's see. Augusta broken. I'm going to have to blow by that. All right. Well, that is it on the comments. I want to thank everyone for joining me today, and make sure you join me again tomorrow night at this time. We'll have another topic that we can discuss. And have a good night.